In this tutorial, we're going to look at the plate production feature. We're going to start by designing a simple conference badge template like the one that you can see on screen. This will contain a simple company logo field, a name field and a department field. We're then going to show you how we can apply some simple toolpaths and then use the plate production feature to import a CSV file which we've exported from a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet to create multiple badges automatically with all of the details and the toolpaths applied like the one that you can see here. So let's go to File, Close. So let's begin by creating a new file. So here we're working with a single-sided job. The width of this is going to be 12 inches, the height is 8, material thickness is 1/8 of an inch. We're going to set the Z0 from the material surface and our XY datum position will be in the lower left-hand corner, and then we can go ahead and press OK. So we're going to start by creating our conference badge template, which we can then look at using the plate production feature to create multiple versions of the plate that we're about to design. So the first thing we're going to do is create an outline for our badge. So we're going to start by drawing a rectangle. Here I'm going to specify a width of 2.5 inches, height of 2 inches. We're going to create radius external corners with a radius of 1/4 of an inch. Now we could simply go ahead and press create, close that down, and then I'm just going to position that somewhere like here. So now I want to think about the contents within the badges. We're going to start by importing the Vectric logo. Now this may be something that isn't designed in the software and has been created in an external software package where someone may have sent you a vector file. So to do that, let's go over to Import Vectors, then from the project folder you can see I have vectric.eps file here, and I can simply press open and that will bring that vector file in there for me. Okay, judging by the actual text, I can see it's all dashed. I can see that they are all individual vectors. So before I do anything, I'm just going to right click and I'm going to use the option here to group objects, so I'm just working with a single entity there. Okay, so I want to align the text to the top center of my badge. Okay, so I'm going to do that using the smart cursor. So I can see there that I'm actually snapping to the center of my badge. I'm just going to drag that up and position that somewhere like there. Okay, so I like where that's positioned. So now we can specify the name and the department variables, which we are then going to use the plate production feature to automatically fill the names and the departments of each of the people that we have listed in our database. So we have two options. We could look at using the Draw Text tool, or we could look at using the Draw Text within a vector box tool. Now, if we use the Draw Text tool, what we have to do is we have to specify a font along with a text height for any of the characters that we want to display. And this means that anyone with a particularly long name with lots of characters could well mean that that text may burst outside the confines of our badge area, and then they'll need to be manually resized to fit within the badge. However, there is an easier option, and that is to use the Draw Text within a vector box option. And so the reason that this would be better to use in this instance is that whatever the text being applied, regardless of how long the character string is, it will always fit within the required area. So how do we do this? So first off, I need to create two boxes for each of my variables. So one for the name and then one for the department. So I'm simply going to use the Draw Rectangle tool and just roughly sketch in a rectangle like so. Right click to come out, and then I'm just basically going to take that one, press Control on the keyboard, Alt to hold that in line in terms of its Y value, and then I'm just going to drag that down, and then having Control selected just means that I create a new copy. Okay, so I've got two boxes there. So let's take the first box. I'm going to go over to Draw Text within a vector box. And so the form automatically updates the bounding box dimensions to whatever vector we had selected. So you can see here we have a width of 2 1/4 and a height of 1/2 inch. So all we need to do then is simply enter in variables. That will be picked up by the plate production tool for the text that needs to change within the badge. So to do this, we just simply start by entering some text. Now when we are creating variables, you need to start the text off with a double exclamation mark, and then enter the text that you wish to put in, followed by another double exclamation mark. And that's the only way that the plate production will be able to pick these variables up. So for example, I'm going to start by typing in name, and then I'm going to put in a double exclamation mark at the end. We could choose a font. At the moment I'm in single line. You could choose TrueType if you wanted to. In my example, I do want to specify a single line, as I am going to look at engraving this. So we're going to use the Helvetica. In this case we're going to go with the 3-line option. And then we just simply go with the standard settings that are in here, and that's pretty much that one done. Okay, we can stay in the form, and I can select my second box, and then we enter in the next variable. In this case, I'm going to put in double exclamation mark followed by the word department, and then double exclamation mark at the end. However, this time I'd like to change the font so it's just Helvetica with 1 line in there, and then that's changed that for me, and I like the way that this looks. So now we have the basic design for our conference badge template. We can now look at applying some toolpaths to them, so that when we apply the plate production feature, the toolpaths will also be reproduced, ultimately saving us time. So I'm planning to cut these badges out of acrylic. So let's just close out here, and then we'll simply switch over to our toolpaths tab. Now before we create any toolpaths, I'm just going to take these boxes that I used for a guide to create the auto layout text, and I'm just going to delete those vectors. I don't need them, but the text will remember the bounds of each one of those boxes. So the first toolpath I'm going to create is a profile path that's going to cut the badge out. So with that vector selected, let's go over to the profile toolpath. So here we're going to have a start depth of 0. Cut depth, we're going to cut all the way through our material. So let's type in z equals, and then it'll input our z value that we specified right at the start of our job when we set that up in the job setup form. So it's remembered that value of 1/8 of an inch. Now let's have a look at the tool. So I'm going to use an engraving tool to cut this out. So we're looking at the select option here, and I have a section called engraving bits. Okay, so we've got this tool here, and that's the tool I'm going to use to cut this out with. And then we can machine outside, inside, or on those vectors. In this case we want to machine on the outside. Here I'd like to add in some tabs, and we're going to add a tab on either side of the vertical edges. So here if we just go in and put in the length, I'm going to specify 0.1 for the length there, and then for the thickness I'm going to go with 1/3 of an 1/8 of an inch. Okay, so to do that I'm going to go and type in Z, which is our material thickness, which is 1/8 of an inch, divided by 3, and then equals, and the software will automatically calculate that for me. So it's good to make use of the inbuilt calculation tools when you see a box that you can enter a value into. And so with this thickness, it's just enough for us to hold that in, but be able to pop each badge out of the acrylic sheet. So we're working our way down the form. We can just give this a name, and we'll simply call that one cutout. Press calculate, and we can see our preview here, in which we could go ahead and preview that toolpath. So now we're going to look at engraving the text using the diamond drag tool. So let's just tile our windows horizontally, and then we're going to go ahead and select the name option, and we're also going to select the department option. With those vectors selected, we're going to go over, close out the preview toolpath form, and then we're going to go and use the quick engraving toolpath. So the first thing we do is select a tool. Okay, so I'm going to go into the specialist option here, and we're going to select the diamond drag 90-degree tool. Now this is perfect for engraving as they come spring loaded, so you can engrave over uneven or round surfaces. So here we just need to specify a pressure, so we're going to go with 0.1 in there, and then we need to specify whether that is an outline or whether we want to fill this. Now we can't fill this as the lines we're working with are single open vectors, so we're going to just go with the outline option there. We're going to give that a name. We're just going to call this one text, and then simply go ahead and press calculate, and if we maximize the 3D view we could then close out here, and then we could go ahead and preview that toolpath. Okay, so that's how that would look if we was to machine this out. Let's put that back in Z, and then again let's just tile the windows and close out of the toolpath preview form. And now we can take the word Vectric, go back into the quick engraving tool. We're going to use the same tool here, and we're going to apply the same depth pressure, except this time we're actually going to fill our text. So we're going to use the fill option here, specify a step over, so in this case I'm going to go with 0.025 in there, and then we could choose whether we want to offset that within each of those characters, or whether we want to apply a hatch fill. In this case I'd like to go with a hatch fill. We can specify the angle in here, so you could go 90 degrees, 45 degrees, whatever it is you wanted. So I'm going to go at an angle of 45 degrees in this case, and then we could simply give that a name. We're just going to call this one Vectric Text, and then simply go ahead and calculate that, and again we could go and see how that preview is going to look. If we close out there, we could simply preview that, and this is our basic badge setup. Okay, so we've got Vectric, we've got a name, and then we have a department in there. So let's just reset that preview, and then we're just going to close out. I'm just going to maximize the 2D view and then use this option here to zoom to fit. And so now we can look at applying our badge within the plate production tool. So let's just switch over to the drawing tab, and basically we're going to just box select everything that we have here, and then we're going to come over to the plate production tool. If we click on that, that's going to open up the plate production box where we can enter various values and settings for how we want to create that plate. So let's work our way through the form where we can set various options to the data that we're going to import for our plate production of badges. So we're going to start by looking at our sheet size. So now that's automatically picked up the size of the sheet that we're working with, or our job size. We can alter this if we wanted to, but I'm going to stick with that. Then the plate size has picked up the width and the height according to our name badge. Okay. Then we move on down and we look at our sheet margins. Now the sheet margins are basically margins on the outside of our sheet, so the edge of our job. And so here we can specify all sorts of values. We have an option here to check for equal margins. So for example, if I typed in 1/4 of an inch here and had equal margins checked, it's going to apply a 1/4 inch spacing on the left, the top, the right, and on the bottom. If I undraw that, then I can manually type in other values to the top, right, and bottom here. In this case, I'm going to go with equal margins. So then we have spacing. So this is the spacing between each plate along X and in Y. So here I'm going to put in a spacing of 1/8 of an inch from left to right, and I'm also going to put the same value of 1/8 of an inch going on top of each other. Then we have number of plates. So this is where we specify how many plates we want in X and how many we'd like in Y. Here I'm going to use the auto calculate option, and this will basically fill the sheet in based on the dimensions of the plate, the sheet, along with the settings for our margins in here. So I'm going to check that. If I had that unchecked, then I could specify exact values in here. However, I'm just going to let the software auto calculate that for me. Then we have the option here to create the toolpath. So I'm going to keep that switched on, and that will basically create the toolpath for each badge template that it replicates. So now we need to specify the input data. This is where we select the information that we want to import, and we can apply different information to our variables which have been picked up here in the variable assignment section. So we also get to choose what kind of information we are importing and what the separator value is going to be. So the information that we're importing needs to be in plain text format. Now we've taken an Excel spreadsheet and we've exported that to a CSV file, which is the comma separated value file. So here we're going to use this option here to import from file, and that is the Excel spreadsheet document that we exported out to a CSV file that I mentioned a second ago, and then we could simply go ahead and open that. Okay, so here I can see the data has been imported into our plate production tool, and by default the software always defaults to a comma separator. And so you really need to make sure that you check that the imported file separator matches the selected options that we have in the software. Okay, so if it wasn't comma, it may be tab, semicolon, or a space. In our case, we can see that we have our entities separated by a comma there. Okay, next option here, first row is column name. So we want to check that the first row is our column names, and we can see that it is. We have first name, surname, department, age and sex. And then if we look down the list, we can see that matches up. So we have Brian, the first name, Dent, the surname, product development, the department, 24, the age, and male, which is the sex. So I'm going to keep that checked there. Software is telling us how many plates it will be creating, and then we need to look at altering the variable assignment. And so this is where we assign one of these fields to our name and to our department. So for name, I'm just going to go ahead and put in their first name, like so. Okay, so first name, got there, and then department, we're going to assign that to the department. So you can see on these drop down options, it's just pulling out all of the information that we've imported into the actual data to engrave. So here we're going to go with department. So that's really all of the information that the software needs to now calculate all of the badges, along with the toolpaths from the data that we imported. So let's go ahead and press calculate, and what the software will do is it will generate all of our plates. So now it's done that, we can close out of the plate production tool. And we can see that it's replicated all of the badges with all of the information that we had in our CSV file. You can also see that it's created our margins around the edge of our part and in between each one of those badges. And you'll also notice that the text for the names and the departments have been automatically sized within each one of those badges, and that's thanks to the text in a vector box tool, as this enables us to constrain text to a specified boundary. So regardless of how many characters there are within each box, it's going to fit that in. So you can see, for example, accounts here is much larger than the product development department in Linda's badge. You'll also notice that you can see we only have 12 badges in view here, and the plate production tool told us that we'd be creating 14. Now if we go to our layers tab, you can see what the software's done. It's created another sheet. If we switch off sheet 1 and switch on sheet 2, you can see it's created the extra 2 badges on a separate sheet because it couldn't fit it onto our sheet with the settings that we applied to the plate production tool. And the same applies to our toolpaths. So let's switch over to our toolpaths tab. So here we can see that we have toolpaths created. So we've got S1 cutout, S2 cutout, we have S1 text, S2 text. So S being the sheet number. So we've got sheet 1 for text, sheet 2 for text. And so at this stage, what we could do is simply go ahead and save out our toolpaths to cut those badges out on our machine. And so that really completes this tutorial on how to use the plate production tool. So let's go over to File, Save, and then here we're going to save that as plate production, save that out, and you can access that from the project folder.